The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as Karoline Leavitt, a young woman with a worn briefcase and a nervous smile, stepped to the podium. Her auburn hair was pulled back tightly, as if to hold her courage in place. She was no one special, not in the eyes of the polished attorneys or the stern Judge Harlan, whose sharp gaze could silence a room. The case was a small one. A local bookstore, Pages of Hope, faced eviction from a greedy landlord, Pinnacle Properties, who wanted to replace it with a chain store. Karoline, barely a year out of law school, had volunteered to represent the bookstore pro bono. The crowd smirked as she fumbled her opening statement. "She's in over her head," whispered a suited man. Judge Harlan chuckled, a low rumble that stung worse than any gavel. "Miss Leavitt, do you even know what you're doing?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Karoline's cheeks burned, but she straightened her spine. She wasn't here for glory. Pages of Hope wasn't just a store. It was a sanctuary for her small town of Willow Creek. It was where kids like her, who grew up with little, found free books and a quiet corner to dream. It was where Mrs. Ellis, the owner, gave Karoline her first novel at age 10, sparking a love for stories that carried her through a tough childhood. Losing it would break the town's heart. "Your Honor," she said, voice steadying, "I'm here to fight for something bigger than me." The judge raised an eyebrow, unimpressed, but Karoline clutched her notes tighter. She'd spent weeks researching, driven by a quiet fire. Kindness deserved to win. The opposing counsel, Mr. Grayson, a shark in a tailored suit, tore into her. Pinnacle Properties had airtight contracts, he argued, and the bookstore's lease was up. "Sentiment doesn't pay rent," he sneered. Karoline countered with a shaky argument about community impact, citing local ordinances, but Grayson's rebuttals were brutal. The crowd tittered, the judge laughed again. "This isn't a charity, Miss Leavitt," he said. Karoline's heart sank, but as she glanced at Mrs. Ellis in the gallery, gray hair trembling, eyes full of trust, she felt a spark. She wasn't just fighting a landlord, she was fighting for every underdog who'd ever been laughed at. She wouldn't give up. That night, Karoline burned the midnight oil in her tiny apartment, papers strewn across the floor. She was outmatched, but she couldn't shake the image of Mrs. Ellis's hopeful face. Digging deeper, she stumbled across an obscure zoning law buried in Willow Creek's municipal code. It wasn't much, a clause about preserving cultural landmarks, but it was something. Her mind raced. Could Pages of Hope qualify? The store had hosted literacy programs, book drives, even shelter for kids during a flood. It was more than a business, it was a lifeline. Karoline's exhaustion faded as she crafted a new argument, her pen flying with purpose. Back in court, the air was thick with skepticism. Grayson presented a sleek slideshow of Pinnacle's plans, a shiny retail plaza promising jobs. The crowd nodded, swayed by progress. Karoline stood, her voice clearer now. "Your Honor, Pages of Hope isn't just a store. It's a cultural landmark under Section 47B of the Zoning Code." She laid out her case, the store's decades of community service, its role in literacy, its irreplaceable heart. Grayson scoffed, calling her argument a desperate stretch. Judge Harlan leaned forward, intrigued but skeptical. "You're grasping, Miss Leavitt. Prove it." Then came the twist. Karoline called Mrs. Ellis to the stand. The old woman's voice quavered as she recounted stories, the child who learned to read at her story hours, now a teacher, the teenager who found refuge in her shop, now a poet. But the real shock came when Mrs. Ellis revealed a letter from 1985, signed by the town council, declaring Pages of Hope a community treasure for its flood relief efforts. The courtroom fell silent. Grayson's smirk faded. Judge Harlan's eyes widened. Karoline hadn't known about the letter either, she'd only asked Mrs. Ellis to speak from the heart. The realization hit her, this fight wasn't just hers. It was the town's, woven into decades of quiet kindness. The trial's final day crackled with tension. Grayson, rattled, argued that the letter was irrelevant, a relic. "Business moves on," he said. Karoline, though, felt a new strength. She stepped forward, no longer the nervous novice. "Your Honor," she began, "this case isn't about contracts. It's about what holds us together. Pages of Hope isn't a building, it's a promise. A promise that kindness matters, that people matter." She turned to the gallery, where townsfolk had packed the seats, kids clutching books, parents nodding, even strangers moved by the story. "If we let that promise die, what's left?" Then came the emotional climax. Karoline shared her own story, how Pages of Hope saved her as a lonely kid, how Mrs. Ellis's generosity gave her a future. "I'm not a fancy lawyer," she admitted, voice cracking. "But I know this, one act of compassion can change everything." She placed a stack of letters on the bench, hundreds, written by townsfolk overnight, begging to save the store. The judge's stern face softened as he read one from a child, "Please don't take my bookplace away." The room held its breath. Judge Harlan cleared his throat, his earlier mockery gone. "Miss Leavitt," he said, "I underestimated you. This court sees the law, but today, it sees something more." He ruled in favor of Pages of Hope, citing the zoning law and the store's undeniable impact. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Mrs. Ellis hugged Karoline, tears streaming. Grayson stormed out, but even he looked shaken. Outside, the town gathered, celebrating not just a victory, but a reminder, humanity could still win. As Karoline walked home, a child tugged her sleeve, handing her a crumpled drawing of a bookstore with a heart-shaped door. "Thank you," the girl whispered. Karoline smiled, her heart full. She'd come to court to save a store, but she'd done more. She'd shown a town, a judge, and herself that kindness was the truest genius of all. The world felt a little brighter, a little more hopeful, because one small act of courage had rippled outward, proving that even the smallest voice, when fueled by love, could change everything. The moral of the story is that kindness and compassion, when paired with courage and perseverance, can overcome even the greatest odds, proving that the power of humanity lies in standing up for what truly matters.